It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
We have Congressman Bruce Westerman is back with us. Bruce, how are you, sir?
Doing well, Paul. Always good to be with you on Johnny Cash Friday. Now, especially since now that Johnny's going to get his statue in the U.S. Capitol.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that was a debate that I was following, pretty close. It was one of those things, and I was really excited when they went ahead with Johnny. I mean, I know, there's strong arguments to be made, obviously, for Sam Walton. I know some people wanted Sam, but I think they made the right decisions.
Yeah, so Daisy Bates and Johnny Cash will be getting a statue in the Capitol. I do night tours up there when constituents are in town, and I can take people into the Capitol after hours when there's not the big crowds, and one of the things we do are look at the statues and talk about some of the great people in our nation's history. So I'll be excited when Johnny Cash and Daisy Bates statue land there in the Capitol.
Yeah.
Not sure how long that'll be, but I know the legislature passed it and Governor Hutchinson signed it into law. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I thought it was really, really well done, and we've been doing Johnny Cash Fridays on the program for a long time now, just because he really is an Arkansas tradition or legend or whatever, and not to mention his music is just really, really good, and just got such a broad catalog. Congressman Bruce Westerman,
and he's from the fourth district.
Ah,
he was born in the 4th district.
Yeah.
Just down the road from where Paul Bear Bryant was born. My friends in Alabama told me that if Arkansas would vote to put Bear Bryant in the Capitol, they would probably raise the funds to do it.
I bet they would.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. So Bruce, I was watching Fox News, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago, something like that, and they mentioned your name in a good way. They talked about your health care plan. I didn't know Bruce Westerman had a health care plan. Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, you know what happened to our health care bill, that the AHCA, the American Health Care Act, when we barely got it out of the House, and then it was the early morning, late night vote. Senator McCain gave it the thumbs down and killed it. And, that took a lot of wind out of the sails of, President Trump's plan to fix health care and the hard work we did in the House. But the health care issue didn't go away. But we moved over to tax reform, and it's almost like people forgot about health care, except for the American citizen who was still feeling the brutality of the Affordable Care Act. So I began working on a health care plan immediately after that. I'm not on the Energy and Commerce Committee or the Ways and Means Committee that has jurisdiction over health care, but I am a duly elected member of Congress, and I felt it was my responsibility to tackle this issue. I have a really great staff member who has a real interest in health care policy. When I was in the state legislature, I did a lot of work in health care policy, and then I've got some friends who are experts in health care policy, and we just spent a lot of time gathering good ideas and compiling them into one document. I had intended to get this out before the election last fall, and I didn't do it. I wish we had been able to pull it together. We just couldn't get all the work done in that amount of time. And then the Democrats were really dishonest in the last election. They took a bill that never passed and talked about how Republicans were in conditions and trying to destroy health care, when the people who destroyed health care in this country were the Democrats with the Affordable Care Act, which is anything but affordable and anything but about care. But, moving past that, we filed this bill early in March, kind of under the radar, but wanted to get it out there and get the text in the system. And lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, President Trump comes out and starts talking about health care again. So the national media started bashing him, saying, he's trying to work on health care. Republicans failed at it, and they have no plan. until they started looking and they saw this bill that I had just filed that was actually I think it's a great health care plan. And so I started getting lots of requests from national media, doing interviews and talking about the bill. And I've been to the White House and visited with them about it, spoken to several groups, and we're continuing to improve the bill. But, we went into it, and with me being an engineer, I said, and having served on the budget committee that deals a lot with Congressional Budget Office, I realized that any kind of health care bill that got scored where it covered fewer people or cost more money was going to be dead on arrival. So I said, we've got to work backwards from this. We've got to come up with health care policy that covers more people and costs less money. And when you look at how messed up our federal health care policy is right now, that's really a lot easier to do than you would think. And we worked from the premise that we were going to make sure that pre-existing conditions were covered, that we were going to lower costs both for the taxpayer who's footing the bill for federal health care programs, as well as paying for their own health insurance through their private insurance plans. And we had to provide more choice and options in the process. And that's exactly what we named it the Fair Care Act does. It's H.R. 1332. And since it's gotten all this attention, we're getting a lot of other people coming in with additional good ideas. The bill's got basically 5 sections to it. It deals with private insurance. It deals with public payers, Medicare and Medicaid. It deals with prescription drugs. It deals with provider competition, and it deals with innovation in healthcare. So those are the 5 main titles of the bill, and any of those titles could be pulled out and made into a standalone bill, as well as many of the sections in there actually were standalone bills. Some of them that we passed in the House last Congress with huge bipartisan support. The Affordable Care Act allowed insurance companies to create monopolies. And we had a bill in the House last Congress that broke up those insurance monopolies. It put the McCarran-Ferguson antitrust laws back in place for insurance companies. And it passed with, I think it was 416 votes. So if you can get 416 votes on anything in the House, that's huge bipartisanship. We had another bill that passed out of the House with huge bipartisan support that would create these associated health care plans where small companies in different states can join together to form a larger purchasing organization and do that across state lines. It's something the administration actually liked the idea. It never went anywhere in the Senate because Senate Democrats would block it with a filibuster vote, but the administration's trying to put that in place. The prescription drug part of it, Senator Leahy, a Democratic senator, had to come up with a bill called the CREATES Act that got some bipartisan support. We took that and improved it and put that in as our prescription drug plan. And it mainly focuses on how do you get generics into the market quicker, and how do you keep pharmaceutical companies from taking a new drug that has a 7-year patent on it, and when they get close to the end of the patent, they'll slightly tweak the formula so that they can get another patent and sell that as a brand name drug. We're seeing a huge increase in the cost of prescription drugs. And then you've got these the more complicated drugs, and we've got to get some biosimilar pharmaceuticals out there, which are like generics for your conventional drugs. So there's a lot to talk about in the bill, but overall it'll lower costs, cover more people, and give people more choice and options, and put more transparency into the system, and give people an opportunity to know what they're paying for, and create competition, and remove loopholes that are allowing pharmaceutical companies and insurance companies, and even in some of the larger areas when we talk about provider competition. Another thing that the Affordable Care Act did was allowed hospitals to form huge monopolies. So we break up the hospital monopolies. We allow doctors to own hospitals again, and get a lot of the free market capitalist ideas back into healthcare providers and competition and insurance that was removed in the pre-socialist plan of the Affordable Care Act, which now they're wanting to do Medicare for all, which is the peak of socialist medicine, I guess.
Yeah. Let me talk to you about that for a second. In light of the balance of power in the House. Now, first of all, I think what you're talking about is great. I think this is really great, Congressman Westerman, that you are putting forth this effort, and you've gotten some attention. Like you said, you've met with the White House about this. And, the president is now saying, listen, Republicans will be the party. The Republican Party will be the party of great health care. And I think that, I personally think President Trump's doing a great job. But I also love how he communicates to the American people, and he makes those statements like that. He makes bold statements, and, you can really tell he's aiming well past mediocrity. I mean, he's aiming for greatness.
Right.
But when you have the left out there saying we want Medicare for all, and you look at how the House was lost to the Democrats in the last election cycle, those districts that they won were moderate districts. They weren't these Alexandria, the districts that the Republicans lost were not far left districts. And so I'm just wondering, what are the odds that the Republicans take the House back in 2020.
Well, the more the Democrats keep talking, the better our odds are. If you look at we need to win 18 seats to win the House back, and if you take the 18 closest races from the last election, the margin of you add up the total number of votes those 18 seats were lost behind, it was 80,000, less than 80,000 votes across the country. So, and then you go up to 30 or 40 seats, and you're still looking at a lot of like 51, 49, 52, 48 votes, and a lot of those are traditional Republican seats that probably should have never been lost. That I think we've got a real good chance of gaining those back. Of course, we lost 3 seats in Pennsylvania because of the work Obama and Eric Holder were doing behind the scenes to try to influence how congressional districts and state legislative districts were drawn. Pennsylvania had a Republican controlled legislature, but they got the balance in favor of the liberals on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. So there was a lawsuit out there that went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the districts had to be redrawn, and so the Supreme Court redrew the districts, and we literally lost 3 seats in Pennsylvania because their Supreme Court gerrymandered the district.
Gosh.
And they're trying to do that across the country. This issue that this lawyer from Little Rock getting on the ballot, they're trying to create I love the way they spin words, a nonpartisan commission to draw congressional districts and state legislative districts. Even though the Democrats have done it, the Republicans have never drawn a congressional district, at least not since Reconstruction in Arkansas, or a state house district. But now that system that worked for so long is no longer good, since Republicans will get to redraw those districts after the 2020 census.
Yeah, we got to stop that effort. 100%. I'm glad that you're following that, because you can obviously do a lot to raise awareness of what a terrible idea it is. I also think, we're talking with Congressman Bruce Westerman, folks. I also think that part of the reason, and I'll be able to get your comments on the Mueller report, but part of the reason I think the Democrats took the House in some of those moderate districts is there were people that were believing the Russia collusion narrative. They were listening to the media, and now we know the media was, in some cases, actively deceiving their listeners. What was your response to the Mueller report?
Well, my response is and even when it was going on and everybody was getting frustrated with how long it was going, I kept thinking from what I've seen in classified briefings, that the information has been released now, that what this report's going to show, if it's done fairly, is that the real wrongdoings were on the side of the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton. And I hope there's some prosecutions out there. And I tell you, the guy that needs to pay is James Comey. And I get you can probably hear a little bit of frustration in my voice.
Yes.
But when I was first elected and I went to D.C. and there was an orientation, they had different people coming in and talking to us, and Comey came in and spoke to the new freshmen, and I heard all this talk about what a straight shooter he was and what a patriotic guy he was, and it was almost like people were saying too many good things about the guy. But not long after I was in Congress, we had to vote to reauthorize the FISA warrants, and you get into the issue of privacy and the Fourth Amendment, whether these FISA warrants are constitutional or not, and the information surrounding the justification of these FISA warrants, it's usually classified information. So you go into what they call the skiff. You're looking at classified information, and you see how, since we've had these FISA warrants, they have actually helped prevent terrorist attacks here. And I have colleagues who are in the legal system before they got elected to Congress who had actually used the FISA warrants, who I could talk to and understand how they work. But there were great safeguards in the legislation to protect the privacy of Americans. You basically had to be communicating with a terrorist overseas before a FISA warrant could be issued the way the law was written to get into your records. But that's all built on trust, and the highest level of that trust are the people running the FBI and the CIA. So to have Comey misuse that FISA warrant system is it's damaging on multiple levels. So as a voting member of Congress now, I have to look at this system and say, yeah, if it was executed the way that it was designed, the privacy of Americans are protected. But if you've got a bad actor at the head of the FBI who has been shown has misused this FISA warrant process, then you have to start looking at, do we do away with this process and then put Americans at risk because we don't have this program out there to stop terrorists anymore? So he's done a great deal of damage to the trust of Congress and the trust of America in the systems that we have there to protect us from people around the world that want to do harm.
Wow. And I saw on the Ingram angle 2 nights ago where Governor Mike Huckabee was guest hosting for Laura Ingram, and he's interviewing a guy named Joe DeGeneva, who is one of the first FISA court attorneys, when the law, I think, first came into existence. And he said, Bruce, he said that the FISA court has already told the Justice Department they were lied to. He said that John Brennan and James Comey need to be very concerned. They need to lawyer up. And he said that they also revealed that the FBI hired 4 independent contractors to spy on Americans 4 years before the 2016 election. Now, I can only assume, Bruce, that those Americans were potential presidential candidates. Now, that's an assumption, but, I mean, why else would you do it? I just think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're going to be astonished and amazed at just how corrupt things were when it all comes out.
Yeah, but I would say there should be no pity for anybody who abused that FISA court system, especially doing it for political gain. And it's a lot more serious than the national media will portray it. That our whole justice system is based on truth and on trust. And when you have people at the highest levels violating that, there needs to be an example made of them, because the system crumbles if you don't maintain that integrity. And what they did, especially with those FISA warrants, just gutted the integrity of that system.
Congressman Bruce Westerman, it's always great to have you on, sir. I appreciate you spending time with us, and I appreciate your work on health care. I'm excited to see what comes of that.
Well, good to be with you, Paul.
All righty. Happy Friday, and have a great weekend.
You too, sir.
All righty.
Thank you.
Folks, it's always great to have him on.